What's going on, code listeners? Dr. Andrew Fix back here for another episode. Really appreciate you guys tuning in, listening to this podcast. And we've got a short and sweet one, but hopefully a super impactful episode conversation for you guys today. I'm going to be doing a brief demonstration here on a whiteboard talking about the relationship between load and capacity. And when I talk about load and capacity, what we're talking about is tissues, and we're talking about injuries, right? And why do injuries happen? And how this came up was a client asked us. This conversation was related to running, but this conversation we're going to have here on the whiteboard really goes for other things too, not just running. It goes for weightlifting, it goes for yoga, it goes for cycling, it goes for all of the activities and things that you can think of. Injuries happen when the load or the stress that's being placed on the tissue is more than the capacity or the tolerance that the tissue has. And I think when you explain it in that fashion, most people understand that and that makes sense. So let's talk about it from a visual standpoint. All tissues have a capacity, a tolerance to withstand the stress that's being placed on them, right? The tissue tolerance or the capacity. So if we use this graph here and we talk about that, like what is the tissue capacity? Well, that might be at any given point in time, the capacity of the tissue is going to be a certain amount. It's either going to be more if you're living in alignment with a very healthy lifestyle and healthy training habits, you're sleeping well, you're recovering well, you're fueling your body with healthy, nutritious things, you're getting adequate protein in, adequate hydration in, as opposed to someone who's not sleeping well, maybe a new parent, they've got young kids that are, infants that are keeping them up at night, or work is really stressful, they're under a lot of stress in their life. These things are going to decrease the tissue capacity. So, we'll call that tissue capacity. And then we've got the load, right? Like whatever the load is, running or weightlifting or hiking or whatnot, lifting something up, like lifting a heavy bag of dog food out of the car or something like that. You've got the load that is placed on the tissue. And that's the stress that's being placed on it that you're asking the tissue to withstand, right? And whenever our load stays below the capacity of the tissue, you're really going to be at a low risk of injury in those situations. Injuries are not typically going to happen when the load stays below the capacity of the tissue, right? Because the tissue is strong enough and it has the tolerance to withstand that load, undergo that stress and not break or not be injured. However, when we have this intersection take place here, where the load and the capacity of the tissue intersect and meet, that is the point where our risk of injury starts to become higher, right? That's the point at which it is more likely that we're going to sustain an injury. And where we're very likely to sustain an injury is in this area, where the load is now exceeding the capacity of the tissue. Now, of course, the way that I drew this little graph or this little infographic here, there's different reasons, like I was talking about: stress, poor training, poor fueling, not sleeping, not recovering, things that are going to result in a decrease in the capacity of the tissue. Aging decreases the capacity of our tissues, particularly when aging is combined with these other things. We're not training as much, we're not active as much. Those things are going to decrease the capacity that our tissues have: muscles, tendons, ligaments, all the different tissues in our body, bones even. But then if we do something where the load is high, we try to lift something heavy, we try to train for an activity, we try to go on a longer run than what we're accustomed to, and we see a spike in the load or in the stress that's being placed on those tissues, if that spike is met at a time where the capacity of our tissue is not at its strongest, that's where an injury is going to occur, right? And a lot of times what happens is people will wait until this injury is there. They're trying to like modify their activity, modify their training to still figure out a way to get the things in that they want to do. But what we really want to do is we want to identify any issues that are present before we get to this point, right? If you're working with a really skilled coach, they can help you design a training program where these intersections are not going to happen too often, and you're not going to often flirt with the line where you're risking being hurt. If you work with a physical therapist or somebody who can help you identify movement inefficiencies or movement issues or faults before they become injuries, we can prevent a lot of these things from happening. Now, once you're already in this situation, we know that it's not just a clear-cut situation where now we need to do things to get you feeling better. We need to identify what the root cause is. Like, what was the reason that this decrease in tissue capacity happened in the first place, and what was the motivator or what was the reason that the increase in load happened. And I'm not saying you shouldn't increase your load. You should, if you want to train and be stronger and whatnot, run faster. We do need to flirt with higher load, but we want to make sure we're able to tolerate that. So, but what was the root cause? Was it a reduction in sleep and recovery? Was it poor nutrition or fueling? Was it increased stress, physically, mentally, emotionally, work-wise, family stress, all these different things? Was it just simply an increase in volume or intensity of the training that exceeded what the body had the capacity to withstand, exceeded the tissue tolerance? All of these different things and more things can lead to injuries, right? But at the end of the day, if we just want to boil this down, load versus capacity is at the root of many of the different injuries and things that we sustain, almost all of them. Does the capacity of the tissue, is it strong enough to withstand the load that it's being asked to tolerate, the load that's being placed on it through training, through daily life activities and whatnot? And if you can keep those two things in a good harmony, you can keep those two things in balance, you can keep yourself and your vehicle in life here, your body, that you only get one of, you can keep it relatively injury free so that you can keep doing the things that you love to do. So next time that you do have something that bothers you, I want you to remember and think about this episode and think about, hey, what was the load or what was the training or the activity that I was doing compared to the capacity that I have? And you might be able to start to make sense of where were the changes that have taken place in either my training recently, my recovery, my how I'm taking care of my body, how I'm fueling my body. Were there any changes that happened recently that now I'm dealing with this injury? So that we can really think about addressing the root cause and not getting stuck in this cycle where we're treating the symptoms, right? And that's really what we try to do in our office. We call this 3-step process: reset, restore, reload, meaning we need to calm things down, address the symptoms so that you feel better, but we need to address the root cause. Otherwise, those things are just going to keep creeping back up. They're going to keep happening. And then ultimately, back to this conversation, we need to reload. We need to improve the capacity of our tissues so that we can withstand the load that we're being asked to do, whether that's training wise or otherwise, picking up your kids, you name it. So really appreciate you guys tuning in to this episode of The Code. Load versus capacity. Keep that in mind as you're out there training. And if you think this episode would be valuable for somebody else to hear, please share it with them. Share it, Apple, Spotify, YouTube, whatever method you're listening. Really appreciate you tuning in and leaving those reviews, sharing these episodes so that we can get this in front of more and more people. We'll catch you next time on another episode of The Code. See ya.